Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Mock Selection Committee. If you viewed our work last year, you kind of know some of the cast of characters here, but this is our annual. We're going to do the top 16 reveal ahead of tomorrow's announcement by CBS. So I hope you have a lot of fun. I hope some of you learned some things, and I think you're going to get a pretty good consensus of some of the best bracketologists in the country. Let me just run down them real quick. And myself, Tim Kruger, TK Brackets. We got Mr. Bracketville, Dave Ullman, Shelby Mass from USA Today, Kerry Miller from Bleacher Report, Brad Wachtel from Field of 68, and we're missing one, Rocco Miller here. He'll be joining us shortly. We do have an alternate this year, which is really nice in case life happens, right? Graham Dorn is going to join us as well and help out and just kind of be like that 13th juror. Is going to watch the selection, and if he needs to jump in and help out, he is ready to go. So appreciate everybody joining us. This year we have a sponsor. It's Godfather's Pizza. This may surprise some people, but they have over 1,200 locations around the U.S. serving the best pizza you'll ever have. Go to godfathers.com. You will find full-service restaurants as well as express units at travel centers, airports, convenience shops, and college campuses. To find a location near you, just simply go to godfathers.com. And while you're there, check out the great menu. If somebody told me, Tim, you can only have one pizza the rest of your life, it'd be an easy call for me, and that'd be Godfather's Classic Combo. It is so unbelievably outstanding. Piled high with pepperoni, sausage, beef ham, Italian sausage, bacon, topped with tons of mozzarella cheese. It is just the best. Another great item on their menu is the taco pizza, one of the best taco pizzas I've ever had. So if you like taco pizza, they're your call. And then to top it all off, sometimes they'll have specials, or you can get this on the side. They have some unbelievable desserts. Their cinnamon monkey bread is just to die for. Cinnamon sugar topped with white icing. It's so good. So go to Godfathers today. Check them out. Godfathers.com. It's a family-owned and operated business. Been in business for 50 years. And that's Godfather's Pizza Pie, piled high. So last evening, all the members of the committee sent in their top 16. Our rule, similar to what the NCAA committee has, is I believe the NCAA committee has they have 12 members. I believe they have 9. Been in business for 50 years. The team's on 9. If the team's on 9 ballots, then they will be. Last evening, all the members of the committee sent in their top 16. Heard a little feedback audio from someone. Similar to what the NCAA. Dave. There we go. So the committee, I think, takes 9. If there are 9 of the 12 ballots, they're in. We went with a little higher standard, so if they're on 5 of our 6, they're in as well. So before we get started, just want to make sure everybody knows we're going to follow all the NCAA procedures and rules as far as picking a team. You'll get a good sense of how the committee does it. I think you'll get an even better sense of how the discussion goes in the committee room. We were told last year a lot of the discussion that went on, it kind of matched up to what the committee does in the committee rooms. So let me pull up, I'll show you the screen right now where we're at after the initial ballots last night. And here's where we stand right now. So the teams under the automatics there, those 15 teams were voted in last night. They were at least on 5 of the 6 ballots. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, all of these teams were on everyone's ballot. So it's almost a unanimous selection of these 15 teams, and they're listed there in alphabetical order. You'll see the teams off to the right, the teams to vote on. After some discussion, we'll be voting on these teams. We have a ballot system. The ballot will get sent out, and everybody will vote. They will rank these 4 teams 1 to 4. The teams with the best ranking will be the one other team that moves into the field as their 16th. And then we will begin the fun process of seeding, where we'll get more discussion. So right now, the 4 teams are Indiana, Miami, St. Mary's, and Xavier. First up, anybody got just some general comments about the field this year?
I think we're kind of right on.
Yeah, I would say that I think it's good to know that we are all on the same page. I feel like in past years, maybe, you have 12 or 13 of the teams that people knew would be in there. It seems like there's a lot more teams that we all feel good about. And I think there is a separation. Maybe there's 16, 17, 18 teams. And as you have 4 extra teams on there, of course, that we're going to consider. But there definitely seems to be a separation, at least with those 15 teams on the left-hand side.
Yeah, I would only add, Tim, I think just from like a day-to-day, week-to-week seeding thing, been pretty steady for me till you get to about spot 11, 12, and 13. Right at the end of that 3 line, start of the 4 line, it's been kind of back and forth a little bit. So be curious to see how everybody else feels about those and where we end up after our discussions tonight.
Barry, you got some thoughts on the field?
I would just say my prediction a week ago is that we would spend most of our time arguing about Tennessee. And I think after their win out over Alabama, that is still going to be the case. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I'm with Brad. Like it's a pretty unanimous 15 there. Once you get beyond like the 7 seeds, I kind of hate everyone. Let's never expand the field ever, because it is very difficult to I always do a first 5 out. I know a lot of people do first 4 out, but man, just coming up with 5 teams who deserve to be considered that aren't in the field is almost impossible right now, because there aren't many.
And as I said, he'd be joining us soon, and he has.
Hey.
Rocco Miller has joined us. There he is. Hi, Rocco.
Sorry about that. I squeezed in a quick meal, and everything takes a little bit longer during bracketology season, guys. Sorry about that.
Eat. Lucky you. All right.
It's now or never. I'm going straight to the game after this is done. So let's get after it.
All right.
Sure. How's everybody doing?
Say hi to Timmy Miles for me. All right.
I will. Absolutely.
So here we go. Yeah. So the teams we got 15. They were all pretty much a consensus of everyone's ballot. Those 15 automatics that are in, and then we've got 4 to vote into 1 slot: Indiana, Miami, St. Mary's, and Xavier. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off because I got a couple things to say, and then anybody else can jump in. Not so much our picks here, but as I've looked around the country, I've seen this happen a little bit, that Xavier's been dropped to a 5 line. I frankly do not understand that. First of all, Xavier has 11 Q1 and 2 wins. I think that's 5th best in the country. Strength of schedules are great. I know their net's 25. That's holding them back a little bit, their predictives. But the committee, I mean, they balance everything that's on those team sheets, and we'll be looking at those, I'm sure, all night long. I know some now think they balance or put more emphasis on the predictives than they really do, but I know one thing consistently they've always said through the years are high quality wins. They really value those. Xavier has 4 top 15, not top 25, 4 top 15 wins. And Connecticut's been getting a little run lately. It should be pointed out that Xavier swept Connecticut this year. And my final piece would be that despite all that good basketball, they've gone the last 2.5 weeks with, in my mind, their best player in Zach Freeman. He does so much for them, and he creates so many mismatches when teams play Xavier. And I think if you polled everybody that watches the Big East, they would say Xavier's probably 1 or 2 best team in the league. But I feel that Xavier should be a team that is our 16th. What say you, Mr. Ullman?
Well, so this is where I have been. I have been probably for much of the year as high on anybody as Xavier. So I've had him in that 4 spot. they got passed for me by Indiana after Indiana beat Purdue. Particularly, my only other consideration in that it's a nip and tuck coin flip, except for two things. Xavier has that rather odd outlier loss to DePaul. They're also coming off that loss to Butler, who, quite frankly, even though I'm a Butler grad, go Dogs, is just, they've had a lot of injuries this year, but they're not that great. And then, I know this rarely comes into consideration, 95% of the time, but Indiana and Xavier played each other head to head at Xavier, and Indiana won that game. So ultimately, the loss to DePaul, the loss to Butler, despite Xavier's better wins, and then Indiana head to head, that's where I came down. But that's one of those that's a coin flip for me. I think if Fremantle gets back down the stretch here, Xavier's probably got a better chance to end up in a higher position than Indiana does given the schedule, but we'll see.
I would say I would agree with you on Butler. About 2 weeks ago, I told somebody Thad Matta basketball had passed him by. Since then, they've been on a tear and have played their best basketball this season. So they were playing I think that's probably the best game they played all year. And again, that was without Fremantle. So,
well, and it's again, it's their big rival. I mean, Xavier's been Butler's rival for back in the old Midwestern Collegiate Conference days. So,
and Hinkle can be a house of horrors. So I didn't really take a whole lot of that away. I still like their quality wins. Rocco.
What's happening? Yeah, so on this comparison, if we just want to talk Xavier and Indiana, I agree with you, Tim. I like the way you presented Xavier. I think right now, if you just want to compare the two, Xavier's got Indiana, besides the head-to-head issue, beat in a lot of the key categories. Indiana does have 7 wins against the field. Xavier has 6 in my projected field, at least. And so that does give Indiana a little edge on that side of things. But outside of that, Xavier's road win at UConn is actually stronger than Indiana's road win at Xavier, as funny as that sounds. And I think the sweep over UConn, not only does that give them 2 top half of quad 1 wins, they also have 4 total top half of quad 1. And then as you go down the breakdown, and in comparison, Indiana's at 3 of those top half wins. So edge to Xavier there. Xavier's had 10 cracks at the Q1 opportunities. They're 5 for 10. Indiana's had 12 cracks. They're 5 for 12. And you go deeper down the list, it just continues to favor Xavier in the top 2 quadrants. Xavier's 11-6. Indiana's 9-8, barely above average. And in all 3 quadrants, not counting quad 4, of course, 13-7 for Xavier, 11-8 for the Hoosiers. So a 2-game advantage for the Musketeers. Neither one of them, I'm sorry, Xavier, a much better road team as well. 4-3, top 2 quads versus Indiana's 3-6. Again, I know we're going to look at 2 other teams. St. Mary's is in that mix too, but I thought Xavier, just with the demonstrations that they've made on the road, that win at UConn, and 4 other road, 3 total. Sorry, let me say that again. 3 other road wins in the top 2 quadrants, which are important. 4 total overall wins in the top 2 quadrants kind of make up for those losses at DePaul and Butler for me, because they've provided evidence that they can win on the road in other people's buildings. And they've got a good neutral win against West Virginia on top of that, which is away from the Cintas Center.
What about talk a little bit about Miami, because I know they're another team that's in contention here.
Yeah, so Miami's one that I was a little closer on than Indiana. I really love what Miami's doing on the court. I think I woke up with a better feeling in my stomach about Miami than Xavier. And in fact, Miami's got a better record in Q1 games at 6-4. The thing Miami's missing the most is a big elite win. They've been the only team to go into North Carolina, even though North Carolina is an extreme bubble team today. And actually dominate the Heels. The only other loss Carolina has at home was a 1-point loss to Pitt in a coin flip kind of scenario. Miami also has a Providence win on a neutral court in Uncasville, Connecticut. And even though it shows up as Miami not having any 1A wins in the quad, they beat Virginia at home, which is 1 spot away from quad 1A. That's an elite win. they don't have the collection of wins at that high level. But as you go down the quads, they have a lot of wins. They're 9-4 against the top two, 14-5 against the top three. And so, and the 7-5 overall away neutral. Their strength to resume metric. I don't like to focus on metrics too much, but it indicates that Miami's actually a top 3 seed as a number 12 overall team in the country in terms of resume. But the predictives all say they're somewhere around 30th. And so, again, without the evidence behind Miami getting that elite win, we do have to depend a little bit extra, I think, on some of those metrics. But I think the eye test, if I was the ACC representative, I'd be defending Miami pretty hard because they have elite talent. They're peaking right now as we speak. And, if it all plays out the way they're playing, I think they end up in there.
Yeah, I would
And-
point out that Xavier's is strength of record is 13th, so they're pretty close together there.
They are very close. Yeah, and I think Xavier's got more evidence. So again, nod to Xavier on that comparison.
And let's point out that Georgia, if we're going to point out Xavier's flaws, the flaw would be Georgia Tech 206 they lost to
Correct.
Miami. I put St. Mary's. No one chose St. Mary's in here, but they've kind of been hovering around, and we tend to vote in quads here. So I just thought I'd put St. Mary's in there. I can't make a case for them to get a 4 seed right now. Had maybe they not had the loss they had here in the last week or so, maybe that would be a better case. But certainly a team that nobody wants to play. I'll say that.
Yeah, Tim, I agree as the West Coast Conference representative here. One of the things that just really tips the scales, in my opinion, is, I measure quads 2B and under losses. Because to me, I think almost every team that's 2B and below is a non-tournament team for sure, unless it's like Wisconsin being at some points above 75. But for the large part, that's where you're going to find your bad losses. St. Mary's has 3 of those. Losing at home to Colorado State has just aged horribly in the 120s now. Losing to my beloved Washington Huskies in the Wooden Championship game, albeit an overtime game, hurts. And losing that game at LMU, as you already mentioned, is now falling in that area as well. And I think those 3 losses start to outweigh the 2 quad 1A wins they got, the Gonzaga win and the San Diego State win.
Going back to what Rocco had mentioned earlier about talking about Miami, I do agree with him that I do have Miami ahead of Indiana. And for me, it kind of Xavier and Miami were not particularly close. And here's why, in my opinion. It boils down to, Tim, like you said, the high quadrant 1 wins. Xavier has 4 of them. 4-3 over 500, whereas Miami is 0-3. Indiana is under 500 at 3-5. And Xavier also has 11 quadrant 1 and 2 wins. Other than Purdue, Houston, Arizona, UCLA, Texas, and Baylor, nobody else has double digits. And 11-6 is a pretty good percentage. 500 road neutral, 13 strength of record. But I do feel like the big separator for me is that record against high quadrant 1 opponents. Being 4-3 obviously is better than being 0-3. And Indiana as well. I thought if they would have held on, if they would have come back and won at Northwestern, it really would have been interesting for me to really maybe get Indiana a little bit ahead of Miami and creep closer to that 4 seed. But for me, I feel pretty comfortable with Xavier on that 4 line right now.
Tim, let me ask you this. What is, and you may know more being in the Big East, what is the status of Fremantle going forward?
Yeah, I don't know. Pretty odd. They said he hurt his foot in that second Creighton game. God, he didn't look injured to me, man. He was really good. I think he might have tweaked it again in practice that next week, and that's when they started holding him out. I think it's more precautionary. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like coaches are way more careful than they used to be with guys because they know they have, money futures in down the road, especially those type of players. But he is supposed to be back by the Big East tournament. They're hoping, where are we at? We're at the 16th, 17th. So I think they were hoping to get him back that last week of regular season was their hope. I have not heard an update lately on it, but I would think that's when he would come back.
Well, and I would just add this. That would have been part of my evaluation. The other part of it about having Indiana one spot ahead right now is that the Xavier team that won a few of those games is without him is not the same team at this particular moment in time. Now, if he's going to come back and he plays like he did before, I think then that obviously, just like any other injury situation.
Right.
But like I said, I've been high on Xavier all year, so I don't have an issue with it. I just ended up with it in one spot difference in this time because of those two, what I would deem as, non-tournament losses, particularly to DePaul. And then, just the fact that Fremantle's not playing right now and they haven't been quite the same team with him out.
It's interesting though, because you could make the same argument as well with Indiana, who's missing Xavier Johnson, and now are they going to be better, or are they going to be because they struggled with him in the lineup? So there's obviously, when it comes to injuries, there's so many question marks. Nobody can predict it. But obviously, if the assumption is that Fremantle is going to be back, that changes it. If he's not, of course, that changes things as well.
Okay. Hey, Zach, you want to send out the emails of the ballot? So be looking for those in your mailbox. I just want to make one silly comment. I wonder if you guys notice this too. Just notice as you go up and down the bracket, forget St. Mary's, but when you go up and down the bracket or up and down the team sheets this year, there are so many teams that really have a small number of games in quad 3. Like, I don't think I ever remember seeing just as one team, Xavier has 3 games in quad 3. Just seems like quad 3 is, I think somebody, I think, Carrie, did you bring that up on another team? Like,
Iowa, TCU.
quad 3 seems to be the forgotten quad here,
Yeah, I brought it up with Utah State because they're 10-0. They're like, I think their margin was like plus 136 in those games. It's like, it seems like anytime there's a team that seems just out of whack in the net, they like just destroyed quadrant 3. And I think that's where Utah State is at. That's the only reason they're anywhere close to the conversation, because they have no great wins and 2 terrible losses. But that was my observation the other day.
Yeah, I think it's you're seeing that in the Big 10 and the Big 12. I mean, just a quick glance: Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio State have not played one. Neither has TCU. But I could also tell you, a lot of those Big 10 and Big 12s have played probably very few. Mainly, the difference is if they played in a non-conference event that got them, that lucky Q3 game. Like I know Northwestern played like Bradley or Liberty out in Cancun. That's a possibility, but it's just because the bottom of those leagues, the floor is so high, doesn't yield any of those opportunities this year. But you see in the Mountain West, Utah State, great example. Majority of their games are obviously going to be there, because even if you're going, the floor in the Mountain West this year is higher than usual, despite not being too top heavy after San Diego State. Winning at Wyoming, winning at Air Force, even winning here at San Jose State is not an easy thing to do this year. So you're still seeing that fall in Q2 and Q3, and even those teams at home are falling Q3 now instead of those used to be Q4s like a year or two ago, or even last year.
All right. As we wait for those ballots and start marking those, just want to welcome everybody that's joined in here in the last 30 minutes. Make sure you hit subscribe and like on the button down below. And also there's a comment section there. You can go ahead and put in comments. We'll be, if you have questions, we'll certainly be answering those as we move along throughout the evening. To keep things moving here while we wait, let's start talking as a little bit of discussion here before we get into the seeding, a little bit discussion about the top teams.
Where
on
do
our
we
list.
start?
Hate to admit it, but Kansas is my one overall.
What did you say, Shelby?
Maybe we should let Shelby start.
Yeah, I think so.
I hate to admit it, but I've got Kansas as my one overall.
You
Well,
So
can
what's your thought
expand on
process
that.
behind that?
More quad one wins, and they're in the Big 12. That's the toughest conference. They're tied for the lead. Not that that matters, but they played tough, and I didn't think they'd be back here after last year, but they sure are. I don't have a problem with the heading of one.
Well, this morning I held Alabama in place, but Kansas is number 2 on my list and not very far behind.
That's fair.
When it's just, this is when we talk about things over the years that the committee has said that they value, right, and playing a strong schedule. Well, year in and year out, there's Kansas with the number 1 overall strength of schedule again.
Right.
They played 5 games all year that aren't in quads 1 or 2.
Yeah.
12 quad 1 wins. Now, I think what sometimes people get fixated on is a couple of their losses this year have been a little bit, they got run over at Iowa State at, that night as Iowa State was on fire and they couldn't hit anything. And then they got beat on a neutral court by Tennessee. And got beat by TCU by a wider margin. So I think those margins this year sometimes maybe give a little bit of a pause for people.
Yeah.
Is probably why. But if you're looking purely, if you look, I really like Alabama too. So, but if you're looking at numbers game, that's why I have them 1 and 2. I still have Bama 1, and then I had Kansas is in the 2nd overall position heading into today.
The Bama game against Oklahoma, though, that left a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah. I think those are fair arguments. I think, just to introduce another team to the mix that you could go a million directions on, especially if you want to talk about margin of victory. I can introduce the Houston Cougars, mainly because they've only lost 2 games all year. One of them was to Alabama at home by 5 in a game they had a huge lead in. I think they were up over 15 at halftime, but lost, obviously. And then their other bad loss to Temple, lost by 1 point. So you take their entire season, they've lost by a total of 6 points. But the thing about Houston that is different than anybody else, they're a perfect 11-0 away from the Fertitta Center. And that is beyond impressive. Nobody else is inside of 3 losses away from home. And they're a perfect 11-0. Obviously, they backed that up with a win at Virginia, a neutral court win over St. Mary's, which registers as wins away from home against the field. Now, they clearly don't have the opportunities that Alabama or Kansas or Purdue have if somebody wants to introduce Purdue. But I do think, and I'm not suggesting Houston should be higher than the 2 that you guys said. I'm just saying that gives them something unbelievably interesting about their story.
I have no problem with Houston or Bama being number 1. I just have Kansas.
Love it.
And no, Graham didn't pay me.
For the record, I have Alabama as 2, like Dave does. And for me, that just really came down to the fact that I think that win at Houston is, not only one of the best wins anybody has in the country. Maybe it is the best win anybody has in the country. You could argue Northwestern's win at Purdue is up there too. But they backed that up with more wins on the road in hostile environments at their rival Auburn, at Bud Walton Arena, Arkansas, at the Hump, Mississippi State, at Mizzou, plus neutral wins with Michigan State and North Carolina. It's just overwhelming evidence away from home that Alabama is capable of beating anybody anywhere, which is what the chairman always loves to talk about.
Yeah. but they lost this week.
I
They
actually
did.
have,
Yeah, they did. They did lose. Yes.
I do have Alabama as a number one overall seed, but I think an argument can definitely be made for Kansas. 16 wins, Q1 and 2 in the best conference in the country, 12 Q1 wins, which is better than anybody in the country. The next best is Purdue at 9. There's definitely an argument to be made. It seems like with the way the Big 12 is, though, with everybody beats up on everybody, Kansas is always shuffling around the board because it's hard to win every single game in that league. That's for sure. But even Texas and Baylor and those teams are squarely in the mix. And I think the committee will, and I think you need to value those resumes a little bit more based on how hard of a league they play in.
Right.
So I don't have an issue with Kansas being the overall number 1 seed. I think it's a lot closer than what it was. Obviously, like a week or two ago, Purdue and Alabama seem to have separated themselves, but it's really a free for all right now.
We haven't had that in a while, a few years.
What's everybody's thought on when we get down to the bottom here? Purdue, Texas, Baylor.
Yeah, I mean, my overall thoughts are Purdue, of course, has fallen lately. Big loss at Maryland last night. Not a big deal that they lost it, I guess, but just the way they lost it was an emphatic loss. So Purdue starting to leak some oil down the stretch here, but obviously we're looking at the body of work. I think it's still very much a 1 seed profile. Wins over Gonzaga, Duke, West Virginia on neutral courts, a road win at Michigan State. I don't think that away from home profile comes near what Kansas and Alabama have done in totality. But Purdue does still have 4 upper half quad 1 wins. They are still the leader of one of the best conferences, the Big Ten. They've had 13 quad 1 games. They've won 9 of those. They haven't lost any games outside of that column. So every other game they've played, they've won as well. And, they're 11-3 away from Mackey. And so that's, for the most part, they've been a freight train and a couple losses here and there. At least they've been on, reasonable losses, and you can understand it. And everything else they've done, I think merits a 1 seed. I just don't have them as high in the pecking order after Alabama and Kansas. You also mentioned Texas and Tennessee. Whew, I've got some other teams above them. And I guess I don't think I'm the Pac-12 guy. Maybe I am the Pac-12 guy. I can't remember. But I do have Arizona and UCLA both ahead of each of those teams right now. And that's a tough decision because, of course, in the Pac-12, you have less opportunities than you do in the SEC even, and, of course, than you do in the Big 12. So those comparisons can get pretty difficult. But I think with Arizona's 5 quad 1A wins, Brad and I have talked about this a few times before previously, and I think that stems from a great performance in one of the premier events, the Maui Invitational, where Arizona was able to beat Creighton, who was technically at full strength. Tim, you and I have talked about Kalkbrenner might be being a little sick that day, but it is a pretty convincing win. They ended up winning it by 2, but they were up double digits most of the second half. They beat San Diego State in that event as well. They also beat Indiana, a team we've already discussed out in Vegas. And that kind of backs up their other big wins where they beat UCLA and Tennessee on their home court. And those are their 5 toughest games of the year. They're 5-0. Obviously, the weirdest thing about Arizona is their home loss to Wazoo, last week's road loss to Stanford. They've also lost to Oregon, who's probably not in anybody's field right now. So there is a mix to them that keeps them off the 1 line. But I think the majority of their top heavy profile keeps them as a high 2, at least in my opinion. And then UCLA, I think optically they look like an amazing team. Obviously a very veteran team, a lot of familiar faces. Tiger Campbell, Jaime Jaquez, and those guys, they've been around for a lot of years, have been to Final Fours. So The reality is the resume doesn't show a lot because they haven't played in a lot of big games. They still have only played at the Arizona schools once. They'll host them later this year. In that opportunity in Tucson, they came up short, but they have, they woke up this morning and their win at Maryland was a lot stronger than it was, when they woke up yesterday. And I don't know how much the committee discusses it, but I think in this mock selection committee, I will introduce it. They are the only team to win at Maryland this year. And not only did they win there, they blew them out. So I think, it's subjective on where exactly UCLA will fall between all of our votes. But I do think, all of the stuff you'll look at after the resume stuff, maybe some of the predictives and others really, really are high on UCLA. And that's part of the reason why I have them above Tennessee and Texas. I don't want to hog the mic forever. So if somebody wants to talk about Tennessee and Texas or other teams, I'll turn it back to the group.
I think Tennessee's an interesting discussion. Shelby, what do you think of Tennessee?
I don't trust them. I think that seems to be the case every year. But as far as this year, they've got good wins. They beat Texas, but they lost at home to Kentucky. Not horrible, but Kentucky's down. The win at Bama is nice, but it's a home game. You should win that. I can't get behind them as a 2 seed, but I'm on board as a 3.
We're having a little technical difficulty with the ballot. Who did not get a ballot? Brad, I got yours.
I did not, but
Dave,
I'll
you did not?
text it to you, Tim,
That'll work.
for now.
Thank you. And I think everybody else got one. All right.
I'll just
I-
mention while you're adding stuff up here, like UCLA is one of those that, Rocco made a lot of good points here in terms of opportunity. It would be interesting, a couple of points. It'll be interesting to see. My guess is the committee is really going to value and like UCLA because of their numbers and their metrics. They've won a lot of close games, and some of that is their style that they play. They're not a great offensive team. It'll be interesting to see how the committee values that versus the fact that even with that win over Maryland and Kentucky eking back into the field, they have exactly 2 wins over tournament teams.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of that is just a lack of chances, but it's also somewhat is the fact that, UCLA, they lost on their 2 chances against Baylor and Illinois in the non-conference. Now, granted, that was way back in November, but it still counts. So basically, they had 4 chances for up games, and they went 2-2 in those games. If you want to call those up games. So, I have UCLA pretty high on my list because I think that's what the committee will do with them. But I could easily see a case that UCLA's profile screams more of a 3 to 4 seed than a 2, or even a 1.
I would agree with you, Dave. It is interesting though. Like if you take a look at Houston only has 2 wins over the field, but their best win is at Virginia, which is a better win than UCLA has. Are they a better team than UCLA? There's arguments made for both. Yeah. But there definitely comes a time where it's not, you can't just look at pure numbers.
Right.
You have to have a little bit more of a feel for it. And I agree with everything you said about UCLA. They're an interesting team where they're going to get seeded better than their numbers might suggest. Personally, I believe they deserve to.
And, Houston's another interesting because, the Houston team last year, I think I looked at finished second in the net and got a 5 seed.
Right.
They lost 6 times as opposed to 2. But, so that's a big difference. And that's certainly 6 losses versus 2 losses if they run the table is an entirely different scenario. But last year, for example, Houston was 15-6 against the top two quadrants, 2 wins against 1A. They probably won't sniff that this year with that number because the American Conference isn't that good and their non-conference schedule is not as good.
Yeah.
So that's another team where I wonder, as good as Houston is, and I really like this is not a thing. If you value the fact that they've dominated a lot of people in the way they've played, I have no problem with that. But if you're going to break it down on who did you actually beat, there's going to be some Big 12 teams and Arizona and Tennessee and some others that could make a really strong case about possibly being ahead of them by the end of this 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, no question. And I think as the season, obviously we're coming towards the home stretch, but if Houston loses a game, of course, if they lose to Memphis, it's not a bad loss, but if they happen to pick up a bad loss, that's going to affect them tremendously. And while they're picking up a potential bad loss, you have all these other teams from high major leagues that are probably improving their resume. So if Houston happens to pick up a bad loss, it's going to be very difficult for them to get a 1 seed, unless everybody else is losing a lot, which probably won't happen.
The only other team I've just mentioned is that it's kind of, I don't think they're not a 1 seed yet, but they're not as far behind as people would have them, and that's Baylor.
Yes, totally agree.
I mean, I think people kind of got slept on them because, they were missing a player for a while, and he's back now. And, I don't know anybody that's going to want to see those 3 guards in the tournament.
Long ago was what they were 0-3 in conference.
Yeah, and it's kind of like they started there, and kind of people wrote them off, and I don't think they've given them the credit. When you start looking at, the win over, depending on how you value UCLA, that win, Kansas at home, Gonzaga in the non-conference, Arkansas, and just back to where they are now. Again, they're not in that discussion yet, but with the schedule Baylor has left, if they go 5-1 to close and get to the championship or so of the Big 12 or close to that, I think they may not make it, but they'd be in that discussion, depend on what else happens around them.
I think if they win at Kansas tomorrow, they should be in the discussion. I'm not saying they should be a 1 seed, but they'll be in the discussion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, you're right, Dave. I mean, when you look at that resume 2 weeks ago versus now, there's a big change. I kind of was startled too when I went week to week how much they moved up my bracket, and I think they're closer to a 1 than they are a 3 right now. That's no doubt about it. We all thought Texas was going to, maybe have some struggles with the coaching, but seems to be just fine.
Terry's doing a good job.
Yeah, loss in Lubbock earlier this week has me not 100% on board anymore, but yeah, we'll see. Again,
Okay, guys,
it's brutal to play Saturday and then go play in Lubbock on Monday night. I get that.
Yeah.
So give a slight pass for that. It's tough if you get that Monday slot in the Big 12. It's really tough because everybody plays Saturday. For the road team, particularly, I should say.
Yeah. Okay, guys. As you saw, Xavier pretty much was the number 1 pick by everyone, number 2 by another one. So they move on. They are the 16th team of our top 16. So we have all the teams in place. So right now, what we're going to do is I want you to send me a text to my phone. You all have it. You all done it. Just send me 8 teams. Doesn't have to be ranked in any order. Just send me 8 out of this list of 16. Got it?
Yep.
I do think those are coming in, Tim, that how the and we'll get a better feel for that tomorrow. But how is the actual selection committee viewing the top two teams in the Pac-12, right? Because
Yes,
that's a big question that we're all trying to figure out what their thinking is on that right now. And we'll get that insight tomorrow on how they see UCLA and Arizona.
exactly.
Because their body of work isn't going to be as good because, quite frankly, outside of those two, the Pac-12 may or may not get a third team or a fourth team in. It's probably will end up getting a third team in, but the bottom 2/3 of that conference is probably not tournament worthy.
Sad, but yes, true. I also would say, whatever Houston will probably almost for sure be a 1 seed, but what order they're in could give us a clue.
Yeah.
If they end up fourth out of the 4 ones, maybe we don't learn that much. But if they end up being above Purdue, or God forbid above Kansas or Bama, we'll learn a lot about how they feel about Houston. Or on the flip side, if somehow they slip to a 2, that will tell us a lot too. So yeah,
Memphis.
yep. I also think Tennessee, how they like just the stack ranking, them against the Big 12 competition, Texas and Baylor, them against the Pac-12 teams that you already talked about. Like, where do they fall in that order? I could see that going a lot of different directions.
Yeah, Tennessee's issue is not the fact that they haven't beaten people. It's just that you just get some real head scratchers in there, like Colorado at home.
Yeah.
Especially Colorado was coming off a bad loss anyway, and it just really weren't even competitive in that game. And then, I can see a conference opponent. I can, even though Kentucky wasn't playing very well at the time, I can buy that one.
Yeah.
But then, to go lose to a couple of the other ones that they've had recently, I don't know, it's just awkward. I just don't think they're a particularly consistent offensive team. They're very good defensively, and on nights when they're not making jump shots, they have a hard time pulling away or winning games.
Yeah, they win some ugly games too in the 40s.
If you're just to your case in point, right? So they're 4-1 against the upper tier of quad 1 and 6-2 against quad 1, but they have a losing record against quad 2.
Right.
That kind of is one of those. That's probably if there's a thing that would keep them off, even down the road off the 1 line, that would be the weird phenomenon. It's like, it's just hard to overlook the fact that they lost to a Florida and a Vanderbilt team and a Colorado team that probably are not, any of those three are probably not going to end up making the tournament.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt's playing really well right now, but I don't think there's enough time left outside of winning the SEC tournament for them to get all the way back.
Yep.
Okay. The votes are in.
All right.
And we have Alabama, Arizona, Baylor, Houston, Kansas, Purdue. Sorry, I didn't get Tennessee out of there. Texas and UCLA. There we are. All right. So now we're down to, we're going to rank these 8 teams 1 through 8. Do we need any more discussion, or have we talked these teams to death already?
Pretty good.
I think we're good with that list.
All right, let's do it.
What I sent you, I'll just send you again.
Yep. And by the way, just so everybody's watching that haven't seen this procedure before, this is going to be the way they're seated, these four. So this won't be the final one, but because we'll go back and scrub them at the end, but this will be the way they'll end up being seated.
Okay, just while we're tabulating this, we have had a couple of questions come in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sean asks, aside from analytics and predictive metrics, explain why Connecticut should be ahead of Xavier or might be in some people's brackets.
I can't explain that.
No, I've got.
Well, I think the easy answer is, one of those teams has beaten Alabama and the other hasn't. And I think that happened on a neutral court in Portland. You also had that game be a dominant win for UConn by double digits. And Iowa State also happened in that event. And UConn was perfect in their non-conference schedule, which is just as equally as important as their conference schedule. Your story is your story, and that's a part of their story. I think with Xavier, they have equal amount of quad 1A wins, those upper half of quad 1, really important for this part of the bracket. They swept UConn, which is obviously their shiny object they have on their resume. So I get it from a fan's perspective. You look at that as like, we're definitely better than those guys. What the hell are you guys doing? But that's not how it works. And UConn, in comparison, they both have had a little bit of issue on the road. I think that's my biggest issue with UConn. But I think the top of their resume with the Alabama win, the extra quad 1 win, even though they basically have the same record, they're 6-6, Xavier's 5-5, does add a little bit of juice to their overall resume. And then you look at the road neutral column, UConn 7-5, Xavier 6-6, a little bit better record there. And then obviously, for me, they're both 4 seeds, so it's really not that critical. But you do kind of look at those metrics at the end, the resume based and the predictive, and UConn's a little bit behind in the resume, but obviously a lot stronger in the predictive. Then you go into the bad losses. UConn has the 1 against St. John's. Xavier actually has 2 with DePaul and Butler.
Yeah.
So again, it's close, but I think UConn nips them out.
And I could see, this has been, I would have UConn ahead at this point, just a little bit, Rocco, for what you said, by like 1 spot. So we're talking,
Right.
It's really not.
It's close. It's close.
It's really not going to change anything in the vernacular, other than possibly a bracket. What region they go in by when they get put into the bracket. But when you look at what they accomplished outside the league, I mean, and Xavier's had a better in-league performance. So, that's a fair way to put that. But when the committee talks about the whole body of work and they look outside, and Connecticut has that win over Alabama, which was a strong win over Iowa State, whitewashed Oregon, whitewashed Florida, beat Oklahoma State, by double digits at home. At one time, Connecticut was a number 1 seed for all of us if you'd have done a bracket back in, mid-December.
Yeah,
So,
number 1 overall. Actually.
Right. So
yeah.
I think that they have not. They hit a patch there in the Big East where they kind of had a bad stretch. But UConn's probably one of those teams that potentially has a lot to gain in the last 3 weeks of this season if they were to start looking like that team that they did back in November and December.
Okay, let's hold up on the question for a sec. We'll get to, if we have any more, we'll get to them in a minute. We've got the final vote here, and we now have to move on to the next set of teams. Alabama, Kansas, Purdue, spell Purdue right, Purdue and Houston move into the field, into the seed. 1, 2, 3, 4. Arizona, Baylor, Texas, UCLA will stay here. We now need to just pick 4 from this team's under consideration. Normally you'd pick Yeah, just 4. We would normally rank 1 through 8, but at this point, let's just pick 4. Have we had enough discussion on these? The Gonzaga, Iowa State, Kansas State, Marquette, Tennessee, UConn. I've been a big proponent of Marquette. I think they're clearly been the best team in the Big East this year in a pretty good top-heavy league. They just beat you in a whole lot of ways, and I think their metrics are fairly strong. They're probably not, as strong as maybe UConn, but I think they've got enough on the phone there. And I think, at some point, wins kind of got it, man.
Oh, we
Now-
lost you, Tim.
I'm here.
All right.
I think when it comes to that in that teams under consideration list, I think teams like Xavier, Kansas State, and Iowa State for me. And look, predictive metrics are just a small part of the equation with what the committee looks at, but they're a part of it. And I think their predictive metrics are significantly worse than the rest of the teams they're competing against in the top 16. And I think what the committee has done in the past, for example, last year with Wisconsin and Providence, they had overwhelming numbers in their Q1 and a ton of Q1 and 2 wins, but their predictive metrics were not very good. And they both got slotted as 4 seeds in last year's top 16 reveal. So
Yeah.
I do think Xavier, particularly Xavier and Kansas State, kind of fit that mold of teams that might not be good enough predictive wise to crack that, to get into that 3 line.
Yeah, I'll say this when
Good point.
get into the predictive discussion. You're right. They take it a small portion, but I think there were some other factors on those resumes that caused it just blatantly say, oh, it was predictive. For instance, this year, Kansas State. I know this is something that the committee looks at very strongly and, really hammers teams for it. And man, when you see that 301 in non-conference strength of schedule, that just jumps out at you. And typically teams have been dropped to seed line simply because of that non-conference strength of schedule, because you look at it and they've played, 10 games in 3 and 4, all non-conference,
And it's hard to blame Kansas State, with first year head coach.
Sure.
Expectations, I don't think they expect it to be this good.
Right.
So your first year head coach, you want to get off to a good start. You want to build up some wins, give your guys some confidence. Don't have any issues with it, but like you said, Tim, the numbers are the numbers, and that is something that will hurt them.
Yeah, especially when you're, matching them up with Xavier 19-7, Kansas State 19-7. Their records are pretty darn similar in here. We don't have some big outliers when we get down to this section of the bracket. And
One thing I will say about Kansas State, and I know I made an argument against them. For them, they have the wins at Texas and at Baylor, which are 2 teams that we have as 2 seeds right now, and that is significant. Now that is the reason why they are in the top 16. But teams that are on that line may not have those types of wins, which are very impressive.
And Dave's Butler team just keeps knocking big teams off. They've got that loss to Butler.
Exactly. Well, yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, that's what I was going to say. That one was at Hinkle early when, Butler had all their players before they, played with half a team for about 2 months. But either way, I think, but to your point about the schedule strength, this is where it shows up, right? So when you're looking at, teams, if you all the factors, you have your non-conference, you have your conference performance, you have your metrical performance, and how they all meld all these together. Well, when you play a poor non-conference schedule, not only do you just, have a lot of irrelevant wins potentially, but you don't have a chance to get a lot of good ones. So you have, your best non-conference wins are Nevada and Florida. Nevada's had a very good year. Florida's probably not going to make it. So that does come into play when you're looking at your total body of work. And it's the same kind of way with TCU with, the injury that's obviously hurting them right now. But I mean, you talk about a team that was expected to be good this year and played a horrible non-conference schedule, just like Texas Tech. I wonder how that ultimately too is going to impact, TCU. They got 2 great wins at the very top of that resume, but they're also 8-1 against quad 4.
I think a lot with TCU, and I agree with you. I think they're a very interesting, tricky team to seed, especially in a couple of weeks. If they are fully healthy, I know Mike Miles is going to be back next game.
Yep.
How do they look with what they got? And if they go back to the way they're playing, from a month ago, that's going to change things. And if they're not, that'll tell us a different story.
Yep.
But I think how they play when they get their leading scorer back will determine where they end up.
Yep.
Agreed. Yeah, I think on just going back to Kansas State for a quick second, the really interesting thing about their profile, especially, I'm obviously one who likes to focus on what goes down away from home. And that's coming from a lot of different committee interviews. But the Texas and Baylor wins are just astonishing because, they have 8 games in the top 2 quads away from home. They're 2-6. They just happen to get the 2 toughest ones. And they got Texas basically within a few days of Beard getting fired, threw up 116 points on them. And, kudos. It's a hell of a win no matter what the circumstances were. But I do think that creates some room for skepticism when your overall record in those top 2 quads away from home is 2-6. And obviously you throw in that 301 non-conference straight to schedule. I think those Texas and Baylor wins are actually their saving grace to stay in the top 16 because we would be able to pick them completely apart and they'd probably be closer to an 8-9 than a top 16 without it. And then I will also introduce Gonzaga to the table. Not my favorite thing to do as a Washington guy, but I am definitely not biased in bracketology. And I am a West Coast Conference guy. So the Zags do have, much like UConn, the big shiny win over Alabama. Theirs, in my opinion, and this is what I want to bring to the table, is a lot different than UConn's because of the fact they did it in Birmingham, Alabama, in an arena full of Alabama crazy fans, whereas UConn beat them in Portland in front of a bunch of bystanders that most of them didn't have much rooting interest. That was a very difficult thing to do. And not only did Gonzaga do it, they did it by double digits and really showed what their ceiling truly is. They've had a couple games like that where they look like the Gonzaga of old that can just demolish anybody on any given night. And they did it against our number 1 team right now. That's just one game. I get it. It is what it is. But they also backed that up with a neutral win over Xavier out there in Portland and obviously beat Michigan State as well. So that registers. Throughout the West Coast Conference season, they've had a couple close calls on the road and pulled those games out. Last night, they avenged their only home loss, their bad loss to LMU, and it was almost an embarrassment. They're up by 40 at halftime. Just one of the crazier games you've probably seen all year. But again, that's Gonzaga showing a different gear than a lot of these teams have. Gonzaga's got like a 1-seed gear in them still. You just don't know when it's going to show up. It's been very inconsistent. But looking, resume wise, they don't have as much data as Big 10 and Big 12 or SEC teams, but they are still 9-4 against the top 2 quads. They've got a big time quad 1 win at Birmingham, and their nets in the top 10. Their metrics are all pretty close to top 10. And, for me, I think they're a clear 3 seed, but I still see them on a lot of 4 seed lines, which I'm struggling with.
Yeah, in terms of Gonzaga, they do have the high quality win. Obviously, the win at Alabama is what, like you had mentioned, maybe it's a little bit even more valued than what UConn has. But Gonzaga is the only team that we are considering in the top 16 that's under 500 against Q1 opponents, and they have a bad loss. So I think for me, that's and to top it off, they're 1-4 against high Q1 opponents, which is also much worse than every other team that we are considering in the top 16. So I think that's where there's a little bit of discrepancy where maybe it's harder for me to kind of push them up to that 3 line, even though I think it's really close. You have to find some sort of difference. And for me, that difference is their record against high Q1 and Q1. It's just not as good as these other teams around them.
I think that's a fair argument. I think if you look at the the category as a whole, I tend to agree with you. If you're under 500 in that area and you're compared to all these teams who are successful, it's typically going to swing the scales. I think for me, you really got to look at the names on the front of the jersey and not just the numbers. And those 4 losses are against Texas, Baylor, St. Mary's, and Purdue. Those are 4 darn good teams. And the wins, Xavier's in the 3 wins. So Xavier is a team we're in the top 16 for us. So again, to me, that's more important than the number that is next to their net. The names on the front of the jersey that we're already putting onto the board and what happens against those teams. And I think that, it doesn't usually happen this way. And that's why, Brad, I'm typically in agreement with you. But in their specific case, they have some very specific teams they've played that have impactful names on the front of their jersey.
Yeah, I'd like to point out their non-conference too. They beat, like you said, Rocco, Alabama, Xavier, Michigan State, Kentucky fringe team, Kent State, a very good team, 56 in the net. So they played a really, number 6 non-conference schedule in the country and had some nice success against that schedule.
Yeah, correct. And I guess just to further the point, I'm not used to defending Gonzaga. So this is a weird spot for me, but yeah, in fairness to them, like those 4 losses are all in the upper half of quad 1. They're all against the teams in the top 12. Purdue is 5, St. Mary's is 7, Texas is 9, Baylor's 12. So it's like, even if you want to go off the net numbers, it actually makes them look stronger in that regard.
Right. And I also think too, if we're going to use, if we're going to talk predictor for one team, we have to talk from another. If you average these metrics, the result based and predictor together, they're about a 12. So that's the last 3 seed,
Yeah, and I get it. It's close. I think.
Yeah, it's very close.
I think Brad has a great argument, and typically, like I said, I'd be in agreement. It's just that, and you don't earn anything by losing games. So I'm not trying to defend the losses at all, but I think they're anchored with the Bama and Xavier neutral wins, backed up again by Michigan State. Obviously, Kentucky game was weird in Spokane Arena, but the rest of the results speak for themselves. They're basically a perfect team if that buzzer beater doesn't go in for Loyola Marymount after that. So it's about the story, and that's their story.
I just don't like to argue with Brad because he sounds so smart. He'll just pound me in an argument,
No, Brad's sharp. I love his work.
I'm curious to get people's feedback on, Virginia's been one of those teams for me that feels like a 4 seed, but with some things they kind of end up at the bottom of that 3 line for me. But and maybe that's because they're 12-3, they've only lost 4 games, and they kind of doing their Virginia thing, and they don't always look pretty doing it. So do you get caught up in and how that is? But we all have them here. I think we all think they're worthy of a top 16 spot. I've varied with them anywhere from 10 to 14 in the last 3 weeks, because there's part of me that sees where they are and think, yeah, they're probably a low 3. But I also look at them and I say, yeah, they beat Baylor in November.
Yeah, and Illinois.
But in Illinois, but since then,
Since then,
they haven't beaten the team.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's been dicey.
Because the ACC has just been bad, and and
a big part of that story.
And Illinois has been all over the place. When they've been very good, they've been very good, but they have some young guards, and when they don't show up, they don't look so good.
I was looking at Virginia yesterday. I'm doing like an Achilles heel for the top 10 teams thing. They're 12-4 in games decided by single digits, like a very, very Providence last year type of thing going on, except, Providence did it against tournament teams. Virginia's barely beaten Florida State. They're barely beaten Louisville.
Yeah.
They
I mean,
barely
that-
survived
that-
against
that-
James Madison. Like that's why they're.
Yeah.
I'm surprised their predictives are as good as they are. That they're top 20 across the board because they are not convincingly beating anyone.
And I think it's possible where we see Virginia fall, and if Miami happen to sneak into the top 16, it'll be indicative that what the committee thinks of the ACC. And I think we can all agree on that it's not going to be relatively favorably. So yeah, I could see there's an argument to be made that Virginia should be. They're playing a ton of games and struggling with teams that are just really bad. The bottom of the ACC, the middle to bottom of the ACC is putrid. I mean, who would have thought a few years ago that this is how the ACC would end up?
Right. Yeah. And I
Okay,
think,
we got
Yeah.
we got
That's good.
Arizona, Baylor, Gonzaga, Marquette, Tennessee, Texas, UCLA, and Virginia in the next voting. We need to rank these 1 through 8. Do we need any more discussion on these? Does anybody have a?
I guess one thing I would want to discuss is UCLA and Arizona.
Okay.
For me, it's kind of Arizona is 5-0 against high Q1 opponents, which is better than anybody in the country. It's not even close. And I feel like, there's an argument to be made that UCLA is the better team, but like we've said before, the numbers are the numbers, and I just find it fascinating that they're 5-0 against high Q1, whereas UCLA is just 1-2. I just find that interesting because they could be. I'll be interested to see where everybody votes on it because it could be wide ranging in that 2 line.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm in agreement with you, Brad. And it all comes back to non-conference scheduling. Arizona's in the Maui Invitational, and 2 of those wins are there, and they go out of their way and play Indiana and Vegas, and boom, that's 3 of the 5 right there. And they got it home and home with Tennessee, so they're going to go to Tennessee next year, and they're kind of setting themselves up well for next year.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I got to see Arizona up and close, and I'm
you were
telling
there.
I haven't. Just when they walk on the floor, it's amazing the talent that's on the team.
They have a ton of
And
talent.
you do, and they do have those nights where they go 2-22, like against Utah from 3.
That's the game I was at, Tim. I was at
Yeah.
the Utah game.
But for the most part, I mean, they have so many weapons. I mean, to me, when I look at UCLA and Arizona, like the old thing, which team would you rather play? I'd rather play UCLA.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think
that's tough. That's tough.
This is what's interesting to see how this year's committee is going to handle it, because a team's resume is obviously who you can beat matters more over the years. Who can you beat? So in that stand, Arizona definitely has a huge leg up. But who you can lose to, particularly if it's multiple times, everybody can have a bad game. So one outlier game, I don't get overly concerned about. But when it starts happening multiple times,
Yeah,
so there's something else. I mean, that's also part of who Arizona is, right?
it is.
I don't think anybody's arguing at their very best, Arizona might be the best team in the country. Right up
They
there
can
with
be. They
Alabama
can
and
be.
Kansas.
Yeah,
But they've also just have this propensity, it appears, for whatever reason, to either no show or walk, I don't know, but it's part of their. So, I won't do it a whole lot tonight, but when you go back through, like Arizona's, because of that, average net loss is 72. All right. Whereas UCLA's is 27.
Yep.
That's a significant, and despite all of Arizona's wins, they also played the lower end of their schedule was much worse.
yeah,
So that's where you factor into this, the overall UCLA's net average win is 121 and Arizona's is 128. So it's close. It's in the same ballpark.
oh,
You
absolutely.
would think Arizona's would be significantly higher based on who they've beaten.
Yeah, and maybe that is shown with their predictive metrics being, a good number of spots worse than UCLA overall.
So I'm sure it has. I'm sure it's all factored
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
No, definitely, that's definitely a fair point.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think another factor on top of all that, if they are at the same spot when we get to Selection Sunday or, the week of going into the Pac-12 tournament, if UCLA wins the league, which they've been winning the whole time, they're still up, I think a game, maybe 2 games. That's another nugget for UCLA in the conversation as the regular season champion. They're going to play another time at Pauley, which again on paper favors UCLA. So if they win that game, they might win the league by 2 games. They might win the league by 3 games, depending on how Arizona plays at USC. So again, some of this stuff could play itself out on the court. Otherwise, if it stays neck and neck like this, I think being the conference champion might help. It's a big deal because if they're both 2 seeds, whoever wins the league, I think should go to Vegas, regardless of your order in the seed list. I think they kind of earned that right. And when Arizona goes to Vegas, I don't know if any of you guys have been to the Pac-12 tournament. That whole arena is full of Arizona fans driving up from Tucson. I can't even imagine what the regional will be like. It'll be all Arizona fans. I'm sorry, Houston, if you're out there and you have Arizona, but it's a huge advantage. That's why Arizona is always in the Pac-12 final.
I'll say this though. I mean, we
Yep.
all know that it doesn't matter if they win the conference by 2 games.
You're right.
If they think Arizona's better on the resume, they're going to take Arizona. In the same way, if they're ahead of UCLA on that seed list, they're going to put them west. Now, it depends on how it shakes out, right? I mean, there could be a way that maybe Arizona can't go west. We don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually,
I
Tim,
don't
that's
think
how
it'll happen, but
that's how it turned out for me. I actually have Arizona higher, despite all the things I just said. It's just another thing to introduce to the committee
Right.
conversation if you have a conference champion scenario like
Sure.
this.
sure.
Yep.
Okay, so we need votes from Rocco and from Dave on rank them 1 through 8, these teams. And I just want to remind everybody we're sponsored by Godfather's Pizza, over 1,200 locations nationwide. They've been in the business for 50 years. It's family owned, family operated. And of course, pizzas are specialty. They have 4 crusts to choose from. The original, my personal favorite, it's thick and chewy. They have the golden crust, which is buttery pan style, the light and crispy thin crust, and the matzo loaded crust, golden crust stuffed with mozzarella. And we've mentioned some great pizzas, but they also have, the traditional pepperoni, sausage, you name it, they have it. Tons of toppings to go on your pizza as well. And their big thing that they do that I like is man, you don't have to worry about the cheese on your pizza. They put a mountain of mozzarella on your pie. Tons of sides to top off your meal with: cheese stick, garlic bread, potato wedges, and of course, who wouldn't want chicken wings when you're watching some hoops, right? We mentioned some of the desserts earlier. They also have a cinnamon, apple, and cherry streusel. That's fantastic. So when you're getting ready for the big game, go to godfathers.com, check a location in your area, and order up some pizza. Pizza pie, pile high. That's Godfather's Pizza.
Do we have to wait for hoops to get some?
No, you can get it right now. Well, there's hoops on every night, Shelby.
Well, that's true.
You could get some early tomorrow for the
Election
reveal.
Yeah. I think I will.
So I'm sure we've all submitted at this point, so it's a moot argument. But we spent all this time doing Arizona and UCLA because they're both in the Pac-12. I think the more interesting comparison is Arizona Tennessee. Like they're both Tennessee's 4-1 against the top half of quad 1. Arizona's 5-0. They both have like 5 games where they just failed to show up against a quad 2, quad 3 opponent. Like I have Arizona and Tennessee just neck and neck, and then how you feel about UCLA versus Arizona should also be how you feel about UCLA versus Tennessee. Thoughts?
Harry, you're great. Setting the stage. Love it. If somebody wants to jump in, go ahead. I feel like I've been talking way too much about these 2 teams.
Well, you're a West Coast guy, so it's your
Well,
floor.
Just doing my job, Shelby.
Okay, so see, this is the dichotomy, right? So my thought is that just based on resume, I would probably maybe not have UCLA as high, but I also, in 20 some years of doing this, see them with their metrics. I see them with their record. And I just have this sneaking suspicion that the committee would rank UCLA of those three teams because they don't have any of the losses that are questionable.
Yeah,
Now
I
that,
agree.
that
I think
may or
if
may
they had
not be
lost,
the right way to do it. And I personally would probably favor the big victories over an occasional loss because it shows who you can win. But I'm curious to what everybody else thinks, because ultimately that's where a lot of this comes down to. What do you think the committee's going to do?
I think if UCLA had lost that game to Stanford last night or 2 nights ago or a month ago, I don't know, it all blends together. They'd probably be like right on the cut line of the 4 or 5 seed. It's the only thing propping up UCLA is obviously their net, they're whatever 3 in the net, but just no bad losses. That's like their best argument at this point.
Okay,
Mr.
guess
The
what?
only team to win at Maryland. The only team to win at Maryland. Just kidding. My
We have
favorite
a
stat.
tie.
I love that stat.
We have a tie.
Yay.
Arizona or Texas.
For the
This
final
is-
2 seed?
This is actually a tie for the number 6 seed overall.
Oh, for the 6 seed overall, Arizona or Texas?
Yes. So text those to me and we'll, it should be a quick vote. You either like them or you don't.
You just need one from us, Tim?
Just one. And guess what? We have
Another
a tie. We have a tie again.
Is this where Graham finally gets to weigh in?
I
Yeah,
think
Graham's got to be the tiebreaker.
Time to
Thank
go to
you
the
guys
bullpen,
be-
baby.
you guys be totally in favor of that.
Yeah,
I
Sure.
Oh,
certainly am.
absolutely. Yes.
So Graham,
we've tried
we
it
don't want
twice
to,
and
we just
failed.
don't want a team. We just don't want a team. We want you, I'll give a little explanation, okay?
Well, for me, it's Texas. And it really goes back to just the quality of wins that Texas has this year. Baylor, Gonzaga, got a big win at Kansas State. I just think when you add up the quality of their top end wins, that's what wins the day.
Well said, well done. Texas it is.
So what order did they end up in, Tim?
I'm gonna give it to you here in just a second.
Keeps his cards close to his vest.
I do. I don't want to, I don't want to make an announcement. It's like when guys know you're going to do the bracket on your brackets released on Monday and they contact you Sunday night. Hey, where do you have so-and-so?
Uh-huh.
Well, you're gonna have, well,
Wait,
I'm not going to be able to do it because
Just
suddenly,
respond. I wish I knew.
suddenly my laptop is going wacko here. We're going 5 through 8 seeds are Baylor, Texas, Arizona, and UCLA.
We got a Texas heavy crew here, don't we?
Just me.
Just you?
And I
Graham,
said, "Nope."
is it Graham in Texas too?
No.
Oh no, I'm Kansas guy.
Oh, you're Kansas. That's right. That's right. All right. All right. The Big 12 power is really showing up in the room. I like it. It's good.
Yeah, I was gonna say we play down there 4 times a year, so I guess I'm basically a Texas guy at this point.
That's true. And Oklahoma's not
Tim
far.
So I'm the Big East Baylor or Butler outlier, and then I'm the Big Ten guy because I live in Big Ten territory. So
And am I the only East Coast representative here?
I'm in DC.
Oh, you're in
Kind
DC.
of, I'm in DC too. Yeah.
Dang,
Rick,
boy.
Were these
Yeah, good
8, was
coverage
this the
here.
unanimous original 8 or was somebody else? Because I have a feeling it's a very solid, top 4. And I feel like the 2 seeds are almost unanimous at this point too.
Not for me. I have Texas as a 3 in my bracket.
Well,
But
you're right.
I think I'm a Lone Ranger on that one. No pun
I-
intended.
Tim cut out, so
What's that?
Tim texted me. He said, "I'll be right back. Discuss the last 8." So, yes, we're supposed to discuss our last 8.
Yeah, I had a
We
really,
don't have to vote on the next 8 now because the last 4 come in by default. So
that's a good point. Yeah, I would just say Tennessee for me made it onto my 2 line over Texas, and I guess we can kick off the next set of conversations about the Vols. Like Perry said, very similar to Arizona. I also think in the last couple of weeks they've been able to acquire some damage they did earlier in the year, really improving for the Vols. Obviously, last night's win for Maryland over Purdue in another conference boosted up a little bit further. Tennessee's neutral win over Maryland in Uncasville, Connecticut. Of course, Tennessee beat Kansas in the championship game of the Battle for Atlantis, an event where they also beat USC, a bubble team. Their road win at Mississippi State's the one I'm mentioning is now, for me, striking as a win against the field. And then they have 4 home wins against the field. So that gives me a grand total of 8. 2 weeks ago, for me, Tennessee only had 4. So they've doubled that in 2 weeks. And, obviously beating Alabama is a big highlight for those home wins. 4 wins now in the top half of Q1, which is 3 more than teams like Virginia, Gonzaga, UCLA even. And a 6-2 record in their toughest 8 games. We've already talked a lot about Tennessee's downfall. Having a losing record in Q2 at 3-4 is very strange. Just kind of worked out that way. But overall, their body of work, they're still 14-6 in their most meaningful games, taking away their Q4 results. The thing I have the biggest problem with Tennessee, why I almost left them off the 2 line, was the fact that they're 2-3 in their 5 toughest road games, the only 5 that register in the top 2 quads. But they start to make up for that a little bit with the fact that they have such strong neutral wins, Kansas and Maryland, as I mentioned, and a road win at the Hump, which is a tournament caliber win, and an 8-4 overall away neutral record, thanks to that championship run at the Battle for Atlantis. All that said, we all know that they're coming in as the 3rd best team in predictive metrics, actually averaging out as number 3, and a resume metric around 14 right now. So again, we're just comparing teams, and that's Tennessee's story. And I think, I compared that to Texas, and it is tough because Texas has done better in true road games, which I usually favor. It's just the weight of the Kansas win on the neutral and Alabama home win, plus Maryland being better, all the things I mentioned. I think the total weight of that, just the fact that they've beaten the top 2 teams on our board, told me the story that they're probably belonging of a 2 seed since they're this close.
I think Tennessee is clearly the top 3 seed for me. I think there is separation with the rest of that
Agreed. Yep.
3 line. 8 wins over the field. I just think it's pretty clear. And I don't have a problem with them being in that 2 seed conversation. I think after that, with Virginia, Marquette, and we have Gonzaga, that's where there are certain arguments could be made.
Yep.
I guess I don't want to say what I have or where I have them, but I think it's relatively close among those 3 teams for those 3 seeds.
Yeah, those are the next 3 I would have too.
no, I would agree. I mean, I think if you had if number 8 or 9, if 9 on your seed list was a 2 seed, slash 2B, that would be Tennessee. I mean, they're right on that cusp. And then you kind of now we hit that point in the seed list, right, where that top 9 is kind of clear. And now it gets a little more interesting to how you see the next 6 or 7 of them here falling into line, because you could go a lot of different ways.
I haven't heard Duke yet.
We're not talking about the NIT tonight, Shelby.
Come
Yeah.
on.
Not that bad.
It's not that bad.
Hey, Tim's bad.
I think they're hoping they could play one of those teams in the second round.
If they get to the second round.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're lucky.
Hi, guys.
Hello. Yeah, we've got a lot of this. It's no different than any other year, but we have a lot of teams that are just very inconsistent. And that causes a lot of that. There's not going to be a whole lot of difference between many 7 and 10 seeds this year again. So, small little things here or there, but they won't look a whole lot of different on the paper or on the court when they play, for that matter.
Okay, if we're done with the discussion, if anybody else got anything, go ahead. And otherwise, we need to rank these last 8 teams 1 through 8.
Anything else in the comments? I'll try and run point here on not having dead air. But so we got one. Why not Iowa State over Virginia for a 3 seed? Double-digit wins over Kansas, Texas, Baylor. 8 quad 1 wins. 1 at TCU with a healthy Mike Miles. I mean, I'm right. For me, it's Virginia and Iowa State neck and neck for whatever that would be. Right in the middle of the 3 seed line. I think that the 8 quad 1 wins is a very good point for top half of quad 1 wins. I think it's really honestly the 8 total losses compared to the 4 total losses that ends up bringing them down for a lot of people. And granted, it maybe shouldn't be that way because we're talking ACC versus Big 12.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Somebody
for
else
me,
run point. I'm going to fill up my.
This is one of those. This is my biggest issue with Iowa State. Is the when you're talking about these small differences between teams, right? The 2 and 6 mark in road games. They've been really, really good at home, like in a lot of years. And that's not to say that their win at Tennessee or at the TCU wasn't a good win, but they have a 2-point road win at TCU and a 3-point road win at Oklahoma. Both of those are fine, but they're 2 and 6 in their other road games. So most of their damage has been at home. And the other thing that gets you a little bit with Iowa State, same way a little bit with Kansas State, is that although Iowa State played a couple of stronger opponents, their only non-conference win of note is North Carolina and Villanova. So you can't really start at this point hanging, early in the year, those would have been 2 great wins, right? But as we sit here today,
No.
Carolina is either barely in or barely out or somewhere around there, depending on, your feeling on it today. And then they also got, beat pretty handily on the road at Missouri. That game wasn't particularly close. So Iowa State just consistently has not been a particularly good road team. So I think that, in my opinion, hurts them a little bit in where you're going to put them in that hierarchy, despite obviously some really good wins, top-notch wins at home. Not a lot of people go into Hilton and win.
No.
No, I'm right there with you, Dave. I've got the same pros and cons approach when it comes to the Cyclones. I think we talked about it a little earlier. When I woke up today, I thought Miami would land higher than them, but they just have enough oomph to get into this top 16 for me. I also don't like the fact when you look at all away neutral, they're still 4 and 7. They did play in one of the premier events, the Phil Knight, and that's where they got the North Carolina win. Good for them because Carolina played really bad that week. Almost lost to Portland, in fact. But not Iowa State's problem. I agree. I think it's just, what the committee always says is where did you play? Who did you play? How did you do? And, they're just kind of there, but they're like a little above average. And when they win at home, they get big names like Baylor, Kansas, Texas as their home wins. But for me, it just doesn't do a lot for me. But there's teams like Miami, St. Mary's below them that don't get those chances. And so because the evidence is there for Iowa State. I stick with Iowa State as a top 16, but I would not consider them for a 3 seed.
Yeah, and I think Rocco, I think you nailed it. I think 4 and 7 away from home is, again, you're comparing them to all these teams in the top 16, top 20. No other team is under 500 away from home. I know that's only just a part of the resume, but that is significant.
Yeah, and it's something the committee harps on. So
And of course,
Although we are
because
the real
NCAA tournament
committee.
is not played on anybody's home court.
sorry about that. Who else is left to talk about? Who else we got?
It's you to vote, buddy.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Iowa State has 4 wins over the top 16, but they were all at home.
I mean,
There are teams that have such a massive home court advantage around the country. Like you know who they are. And I just feel like that's not enough information. I mean, obviously beating teams like Kansas, all those teams at home, they're great wins, but they still need to be treated differently. If you did it on the road, that's a whole different story.
Marquette's in the same boat. Their best one away from home was at Seton Hall.
Yep.
and that's probably been for me why I've tend to those 3 Big East teams kind of all been clumped together for a while for me because they're all very identical. I think, overall you could say that overall accomplishments, Connecticut and Xavier may have actually done a bit more than Marquette, even though Marquette leads the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And to Tim's point, he sees them play more than anybody, might be the best team, but it's, we'll see how this next 3 weeks plays out. If one of those teams separates a little bit or does something.
Yeah, right now Marquette's. I mean, they're a huge game next Tuesday. Marquette goes to Creighton. I mean, Creighton has to win that game. There's just no other way around. If they win, then they're in a tie for first. Yeah, if Marquette wins that one, they'll be Big East champs.
Not bad for a team picked 9th.
No, yeah, incredible, incredible. I kind of wait for that Shaka fade that usually happens, but it ain't happening this year.
Yeah.
If Fordham was picked 14th in the A10, and they might win it.
There you go. That's amazing. Southern Miss is it? Southern Miss is in that
I
group
was going
too.
to say Southern Miss.
Yeah. 13th. Hey Tim, are we voting right now?
I'm waiting on you, buddy.
Oh, can you put the list back up? I was just running my mouth too long. My bad.
I'm sorry. So we got, let me just read them off. It'd be easier. Iowa, because
Okay.
everything dropped when my computer crashed. So
Okay.
Iowa State, Kansas State, UConn, Xavier, Tennessee, Gonzaga, Marquette, Virginia.
And then just send you the in order.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
It wouldn't be the mock selection committee if we weren't having technical issues.
Well,
I think
it
for
might help
me,
me to hit
with
hit
what
the
we're going
old
to
save
see,
button once in a while.
with what we're going to see tomorrow, UConn is the one I'm the most curious about, just to see how much the committee values those predictive metrics. They're going to be interesting of note, that I'm the most curious about.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they're. I got into it last week with a guy on Twitter over that he had them a high 3, and I'm like, okay, they're not a high 3, but I could see him being a low 3. I could see him being, I could see him being ahead of Xavier, definitely, even though Xavier beat him twice. If you look metrics alone, yeah, they have it over Marquette. But if you dig a little deeper, it's pretty close.
Mhm.
UConn is a less disastrous version of the Trae Young Oklahoma team. That was what they started out like 12-1, 13-1, and crashed and burned right before the selection reveal. They were still, I think, 16. They were in there just barely, and then they ended up as a 10 seed. I'm not saying Connecticut's going to crash to a 10 seed, but I think that what they did in the first
Was that
7 weeks is very similar.
Was that Trae Young or Buddy Hield?
That was Trae Young.
Yeah, that was the Trae Young group. Yep.
Okay. We have it, gentlemen. Tennessee, Virginia, Gonzaga, Marquette. Very close. Very, very close between those three, Virginia, Gonzaga, Marquette. Very close. We could have just taken the rankings and went at them in here, but I thought we should just do these 4 separately. Because we are going to run real quickly through we're doing okay in time. We'll run real quickly through the scrub list on the seeds. Any further discussion? I think we had a good discussion on Iowa State. We kind of beat Kansas or UConn and Xavier to death earlier. Yeah, I mean, these teams are all like 19-7. Kansas State's 19-7, correct?
I'll take your word for it.
Yep,
Yeah, they
they're all
are.
19-7. Three
I
and
love
4
it.
19-7.
I love handicapping when you get like you're doing your season, you get 4 teams with the same record. You're like, okay, all I got to do is look who played the tougher schedule, who won the best games. Yeah, it makes the job a lot easier.
Yeah.
Just to
Well,
go
I
on.
mean, personally,
sometimes overall records can be a little
deceiving.
not deceiving, but
Oh,
yeah,
right.
obviously when
That's when you got to look at strength of schedule.
yeah, I
and,
mean,
you know.
if you're playing in the Big 12, you're probably going to lose a few more games, or
Sure.
it's not going to hurt you as much to lose a couple more games than it is.
Iowa State's 17-8, but obviously 200 points better in the non-conference than Kansas State, their partner. So there you go. I just want to throw something out real quick as we're almost wrapping up here. So I did a little research. I want to kind of track. I keep track of these year to year to year. I think it's kind of interesting. Like, what are their tendencies? Brad's brought up a couple times, I wonder what they're going to do with UConn. That's going to tell a lot. I wonder what they're going to do with Virginia. That'll tell a lot about the ACC. I wonder what they'll do with the Pac-12. So I think it's kind of interesting that every year there's been one like team that's just out there that doesn't get in the top 16 that's in the top of the net. This year it's probably St. Mary's, right? But every year there's also been a team or a couple teams plus. There was Texas 21, Missouri 35 a couple years ago.
Yep.
Providence 29 last year. Last year was everybody's top 20 except Providence.
That Missouri team
before-
ended up getting a 9, by the way,
Yeah.
at a month later.
So, just, on our bracket, we got 25 as the highest or lowest seed, highest, however you want to look at, highest number, still Xavier. But everybody else, I think, other than Kansas State, right?
I think so.
Yeah, there are 20, I think, as of
Yeah.
today.
I think it's just curious. I think it's just like fascinating, like once this net has come out, how much they've really followed that net, which will be favoring a team like UConn, right? they tend to really, you know, like look at last year, 7 teams, the top 7 were all in the top 10. Year before, 9 of the top, they had 9 of the top 10 in there. So
Right.
they really do. They don't, you're not going to see a 25 being in the second line. It's just how it is. We ready to vote?
I also noticed, Tim, last year, out of that 16 they revealed, only Texas didn't make it into the actual top 16. They got 15 out of 16 back into the bracket, which I think is the most.
Yeah, that was the first year the Super Bowl was so late, so pushed it back a week.
Yeah, so now we're in the same boat. 'Cause
Right.
it got pushed back again. So, yeah, I mean, we're pretty much we're all going to be adjusting on Monday, no matter what they do.
We're almost to March Madness, and they're doing the reveal.
I know. I wish they would do it in January, because then it would give us more guesswork to do. I think it takes away some of the guesswork. But
I do think it's hilarious when you see brackets on, say, Monday, and the top 8 teams all played over the weekend. Nobody had a great win. They all kind of won. And then you'll look at somebody's bracket and they'll have like the A-seeded team number 1 in their were you not watching?
I don't.
It's kind of like here they're giving you the answers to the test so far right here, right?
Yeah, I don't like it when people question me the day after the reveal or 2 days after. Why do you have Gonzaga wherever? I don't. The committee does. Yell at them.
Not a poll.
Oh.
Yeah, pretty funny.
All right. So let's rank these 1 through 4.
Coming.
And I got a feeling these are going to be all over the board.
Yep. So we're gonna discuss I remember last year we had our 16 and we were like, all right, well, this team's probably gonna sneak in. I think it was Duke we were talking about. Who's gonna be that one team? It's probably Indiana, right? That we're not gonna have in, but they're gonna sneak in anyway.
I think it could be Miami. That's kind of, I had Miami as my top overall 5 seed. So they're the one team I think. But yeah, there's an argument that could be made for Indiana. You could even include St. Mary's in that conversation based on their metrics.
Yeah, I think I always like to throw a wild card in there that nobody's thinking about. This would take more than one wild hair on a committee member's backside, but because it's going to take 6 of them to agree. But Northwestern, just because they obviously their predictives and their non-conference schedule are not good. 42nd in net as well, which to Tim's theory is a horrible fit. But after that, they've got an amazing road resume. 7-3 away neutral, 5-2 in the quad 2 away games, much better than most of the teams we just talked about. And they're 8-4 in Q1. So anyway, if something wild were ever to happen in this thing, which we really don't usually see, that would be the team I would say could maybe wildly get to the 16 spot.
Yeah.
And that would be outrageous if it happened, to be honest.
They're 21 in strength of resume, which shows the resume should be in the conversation. And if it's a resume based, because to me, I think groupthink is a lot like, you got to persuade one side to the other. And if groupthink ends up going towards resume heavy, they have a chance, I think.
Yeah, but I think the NCAA has this net tool for a reason.
I agree with that.
So they're gonna want to use it. I mean,
for sure.
For their sake, credibility's sake.
Going back to Tim's point, Missouri made the reveal with 35 net. Obviously, this is even further extreme. But maybe like a 3 or 2% chance.
Maybe, I don't see anybody this year. It just now it's how quickly things change, right? 2 weeks ago, 5-6 was a mess. There was all kinds of teams. I mean, look for a while that Illinois was going to run up and get into the 4, slot. But okay, we got a tie again for the 14th and 15th seed overall between Kansas State and UConn.
What
So
number
just
is it for?
14 and 15 overall.
Let Graham vote. Let Graham vote.
I think Graham is going to get a vote. Dave, are you there?
I'm coming.
All right. All right. Kansas State or UConn?
Oh, I sent you both, but they're in the right order.
Kansas State's Graham's rival, right?
Yeah, but I can keep it straight for this one because, frankly, I think to me the answer is pretty clear. So I'll just say that.
All right. I like that. The quest to clarity is what this is all about.
All
That's
right.
And now that
so
I see him typing it in, yeah, it's
UConn
correct.
edge. UConn edge. So UConn 14, Kansas State 15. All right. Now let's get down this list. Are we happy with everything?
No, Duke's not there. Dang it!
We okay with? I'll just shout out a couple. Purdue over Houston. Everybody okay with that one?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm good with it, but I'm curious. I think it's a great debate.
Here's what I'm worried about, and this is when Dave's usually the one that gets into this thinking about the committee, which I really like, because then I start you get so engrossed in what you're doing. But how much weight does their net number 1 poll?
I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that they have a bad loss. They have a Q3 loss. None of those other teams on the one line have a bad loss. And you're trying to figure out some sort of separation. That to me,
And
kind of
yeah,
puts
and
them-
the other point would be, wasn't a bad non-conference, but I would like to see Houston. They don't have to now; they're moving to the Big 12, but I would like to see them scheduled like Gonzaga. Have a little more meat on the bone in Q1.
I think they did this. They didn't schedule the Zags, but they had more meat on the bones this year than previous.
Yeah, but still, I mean, St. Mary's and Virginia. I mean, it's you're not really going out on a limb there.
No, but they couldn't
And
get
then
that.
Oregon. I mean, now they did play a good Oral Roberts team, and just to show you how they can play, they just smashed them by 40 points. So
Yeah.
Okay. We have the Texas Arizona.
Yeah, we've,
I
we've a
I got to tell
question
you
on
this.
the-
I was a little surprised. Go ahead, Kerry. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say we got a question. Somebody said direct head-to-head results haven't come up. Just curious how close do 2 teams have to be before that kind of serves as the tiebreaker? And I had this come up in my bracket on Tuesday, I think, where I initially had Iowa 1 spot ahead of Rutgers, or 1 spot behind Rutgers. I was like, they lost twice to that team by 11. I better swap them. Like that's about the only time I honestly look at head-to-head results.
Yeah, it's going to come down to where you can't differentiate teams without it, and very rarely does that come to play.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I would say Dave at the very beginning. Dave talked about Indiana's win at Xavier. If it is going to come into play in a team, especially a non-conference game, which is exceedingly rare, we need to fix the schedule. We need more of those, but I'll digress. Indiana's road win at Xavier, when Indiana was in position to be considered for a 4 before the Northwestern loss, I actually thought made a little bit of a difference just because I was looking at them head to head. But like Shelby said, it's very rare. And even in Xavier's case, for me, with the double win over UConn at both arenas, there's such a larger body of work with UConn that it really didn't even come up for me.
Well, the other thing I think that's worth pointing out to people is that the problem is once you start going down that head-to-head road, then
You're in trouble.
when do you stop? Because, then you're going to have lost to somebody else, and are they supposed to be ahead of you? So, I think Shelby said it very well. It's not that it never comes into play, but it's rare when it does, and it usually is, like I said, it comes down to two teams for one spot, and everything is very, very, very close. And if there's a differentiate and they play, particularly if it was on a neutral court, or in my case, Indiana won on the road. I think a home win against them doesn't mean as much as beating them on the road or a neutral.
Right. Exactly.
Last year, Creighton was 33rd overall and Marquette was 35th. That was one of the rare times I think it came into play because Creighton won both home and away and then the neutral court matchup at the Big East tournament.
Now, if you beat a
And
team
that was a
3
Thursday?
times, I would think it would be awfully tough if they're close to put that team that lost 3 ahead of the other team.
Yeah.
Was that on a Thursday? Because I think we all know anything after Friday might not have been considered by the voting.
Yeah, that was Thursday.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it got
They beat
factored in.
Providence. Although I think Providence got hurt by that blowout Creighton laid on them on Friday. I think on their seeding, they probably weren't seeded at that point. They were so far down
That's
the
possible.
bracket.
Yeah, that's possible.
How about so going down here? One I kind of puzzled. I thought Tennessee would get more love from everybody.
I was there with Tennessee.
You got it for Rocco.
I mean,
That's
there
right.
was a long time, even before Tennessee had a couple of its wins, that I had them right on the cusp of being a 1 seed, despite not having some of the wins yet. And the ironic part is now they have better wins, but they've also just, put some real head scratchers up.
Yeah.
The good news is for them in the last 3 weeks, if they can go play somewhere, if they go tomorrow in Kentucky and they just, if they dominate at Rupp Arena and win by double digits, I think that also goes a long way to saying, okay, they're going to play pretty well outside of, I know they have a neutral court win over, I think Kansas, but to go on the road and get another big win, I think would maybe help solidify a little bit of that for them, in my opinion. But most of their,
and they get 3
most of their biggest
opportunities.
games
They're
have
at
been at home.
Kentucky, at Texas A&M, and at Auburn to end the season. So there's definitely chances for them to elevate themselves up to that 2 line. And I don't know if a 1 seed is possible, but definitely in the conversation for a 2. I mean, they have the opportunities to slide up.
No, that's a good point, and absolutely. So they've been pretty good at home, and maybe not quite as good consistently on the road.
I would be
All right.
down for scrubbing Tennessee ahead of UCLA if anybody wants to discuss that.
I think on my own
UCLA
personal one, I'm going to post later tonight. That's how I'd probably have it.
I mean, Tennessee has wins over Alabama, Texas, and Kansas. And I know, Rocco, I know you love UCLA's win at Maryland, but we haven't mentioned Maryland as a top 16 team. So
And they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be.
No.
They're not in that arena yet. But it's interesting. I think my biggest surprise is the groups 5 and 6 are actually my 8 and 9. And then, the groups 7, 8, 9 are my 5 and 6.
I think what it boils down to, Tennessee and UCLA for me, is just the UCLA is, while they have a worse record against Q1, they have 0 Q2, Q3, or Q4 losses, whereas Tennessee is under 500, as we discussed earlier, against Q2 opponents.
Yeah.
It's a significant difference.
Anything else?
I mean, I could go either, that's one of those, I can see a definite argument on either side.
Yeah.
My guess is, if you're asking me my hunch, I know I tend to harp on it. I think the committee's going to look at UCLA's number 4 net rating overall, no bad losses. 21, what are they, 21-4?
22.
Yeah.
And a couple of nice wins, including Arizona, and they're going to say, oh yeah, I think that's better than that team that lost 4 games to quad 2 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's right, I would probably favor the better wins myself, because I think it proves who you can beat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that old adage like comes up all the time. Would you rather have a clean resume with no bad losses, or do you want like the big wins and some schizophrenic results down your resume?
Yeah, and I mean on the bottom, I would have those all mixed around, but they're so close. I don't have a issue with that on the bottom 4. So
Yeah, and this is the area I think the reveal will help us the most with, because it's
right.
gonna give away a lot of clues.
Okay, I'm rolling this along. This is turning out kind of interesting, actually. So
Yeah.
Texas has to go. Well, no, they don't.
To Carrie's
So-
point, I mean, I could see UCLA's
Baylor's close.
body of work as being a
Army.
4 seed in this group.
So Texas,
Why wouldn't Baylor go to Kansas City?
Because
because Kansas is already there.
Oh yeah, duh.
I mean, yeah, they can't go to Vegas.
Baylor would probably go to Louisville.
Yeah, I think so.
They
or Las
can't.
Vegas.
They can't.
They-
One
they
one
can't.
can't play 5.
1-5. Yeah.
Oh, 1-5, yeah.
Go to East Region, New York.
So yeah, they'd have to go.
Vegas is a little
We'd have to go-
closer than New York.
Vegas
to
would be
go,
closer than New York, that's for sure.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that's where I got them. So Texas would have to go over here to Alabama. The only thing you watch there is that region gets too powerful, according
Yeah.
to seeds.
Yep.
And then we've got Arizona and UCLA.
Yep.
So neither one gets to go west.
Well, then if you're going to do it in order, Arizona will go to Kansas City and UCLA they would get the
Yep.
favorable.
Now Mick Cronin will appreciate the guide. That's fine with Mick.
Yeah, there you go.
But not the UCLA fans.
They got alumni in New York City. I mean, it won't be a lot.
No.
So Tennessee,
Can't go south.
probably go to New York.
Yeah.
That'd be their closest,
Oh yeah, you're right. Yep.
more natural region.
We got Virginia.
Yeah, you might want to do
They would
Tennessee.
go to Louisville.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess that's
But
fine.
here's the deal. You've already got a 10, 16. You've only got 17 here. We're still okay. We're still all right. All right.
On my
And
mileage chart, KC is closer than New York for Tennessee.
What is?
Kansas City.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah,
Who
but
we
you
got?
all- you're
Then
gonna-
Virginia
you're
would
gonna
go
run right
east.
into the
It's by 13 miles.
yeah.
Still counts.
Yeah, but let's see what we got. Gonzaga and Marquette. So that would work. That would actually work better for everybody.
Yeah. The only thing, Tim, are we going to get into a number issue though? If you put Tennessee there, now you're going to have 1, 7, and 9.
Yeah, I already
Yeah,
looked at
no.
that. It's 17 right now. So, I see. No. We're gonna have
It'll be better.
Kansas is 2 actually.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're okay.
Okay.
We're okay because then we have Gonzaga here, right?
Gonzaga West.
Boy.
Arizona and UCLA are gonna go ballistic there. It works
so
out
we'll-
this way sometimes though.
So we'll
And then finally we got who do we got in order? Iowa State, UConn, Kansas State, Xavier. So Iowa State would
You can
have
go-
to be
They can
here.
go in. There's already 4 Big 12 teams.
Yeah,
so
they'd have to go here though, and then you
Here.
move.
Yeah.
Kansas,
State.
then Kansas State would either go Vegas or Louisville. You wouldn't put them opposite the
Yes,
one.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And
Or the-
so secondly is UConn, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Kansas State would have to go to the south because the Marquette couldn't face UConn or Xavier.
Correct.
Not face,
Right.
but be the same region.
There you go. That solved it.
Are they number wise balanced all around 34?
Yeah, let's
Marquette's the
figure
lowest
that out.
grade, so that should be good.
Kansas State is third lowest, right? They were 15.
Yeah.
They should
Yeah.
be good.
Kansas State would have to go there, and then Xavier would go to Kansas City.
Yeah,
And what was Marquette? 12,
12. Yeah,
27, 28,
looks pretty balanced.
and 6. Yeah, that's 34. That's perfect.
Yep.
Where did you say, Dave?
I said the Kansas State's going to have to go there because you can't put them
Yeah.
opposite Kansas.
So UConn gets first choice, so they'd probably take Kansas City.
Yep.
I don't know.
That region would be
Vegas,
ridiculous.
Yeah, Connecticut.
There we go.
That is a ridiculous region. You're right.
These all balanced. You got 9 here. What was Gonzaga? 11.
Yes.
But we're liable to see something like we've seen something like that before.
36.
And
That's
then that-
perfect. Yeah, they're going to be balanced.
That's the region where none of those teams make it.
Right.
That's the
That's
region
true.
that gets blown up.
Yep. Yep.
It's
Hey,
where
just for
Creighton wins it as a 6 seed.
for people at home, just kind of we'll run through this really super fast. This is where they would go. Purdue would go to Columbus. I've already checked this a million times. Birmingham is closest for them. Then we'd go to Baylor. This is interesting on Baylor. I think actually Denver's actually a little bit closer.
That's available. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
They can partake in the amenities around there.
And Texas would prefer I think Baylor's actually closer to Des
No,
Moines.
it's close. Denver's closer by 8 miles.
Awesome.
Yeah, the only question there would be the committee might say, well, we're going to put you. Yeah, I mean, it really is 6 of one, half dozen the other, right?
Yeah.
Because then Texas has got to go to Des Moines.
It's like I had a situation, I don't know, a week or two ago where Gonzaga was where they were on the 3 line for me. One of the other Kansas State or whatever was ahead of them at that point before they lost a couple. And, the only places left for Gonzaga were either Greensboro, Albany, or Orlando. Ended up with them Orlando because I could see the committee saying, well, you're going to have a cross country plane trip anyway, but we'd rather keep Virginia and Greensboro and do that rather than have everybody travel a long distance.
So Greensboro would be Tennessee.
And
Same
Virginia.
for Virginia.
Yeah,
Mm.
Virginia definitely go to Greensboro. Gonzaga would go to Sacramento.
Yep.
Marquette, your SOL on Des Moines.
Columbus.
I actually thought
I'm sorry.
I would
said
think
they would rather go to
Columbus would be-
Arizona. I thought
Columbus.
Sacramento was closer for Arizona by a few miles.
I don't think so. I think Denver's closer.
Yeah, Denver's preferred too.
Yeah, about
I would say Marquette probably go to Columbus then.
Yep.
Piss off Xavier, but that's too bad. Should have won more
just
games.
all
Should've
won more games.
left.
Yeah, Albany, and actually this one shocked the hell out of me on some of these.
So, sorry to
Iowa
backtrack a little bit.
State, the Columbus is closed, right? So Birmingham's closed. So Greensboro's
Albany
closed
and
too.
Orlando.
All right. Yeah, so it's 6 of one, half dozen the other there.
Yeah, everybody left is going to Albany or Orlando.
Okay, that makes it easy. Yukon would definitely want to go to Albany. I think it's only 100 miles.
But what's the odds of if Miami doesn't get a 4, Miami being the 5 in Orlando?
I would think they would be.
Yeah.
I mean, they're more than, it's not like it's next door.
No.
They're
Yeah,
only
it's the same
protected-
state, but
Yeah, they're only protected for first round
yeah,
games.
they're only protected one. Or was it a 4? Was it a 4 in the second game? They didn't want to have a home court at disadvantage?
No, it's just the first game.
Okay,
It's for-
they
They
changed
don't
that?
want to put, they try not to put the force, like the last 4 seed at, like they wouldn't want to put Gonzaga in Albany and in the East. They try not to do a double whammy, but other than that, I don't think they
Okay.
do much.
Right, but
Well, there we go.
At that seed, it's whatever's left.
There we go, guys.
Yay!
All right. Everybody that's
Let's
listening,
go.
thank you so much. If you missed any of this, you can watch a replay as soon as we're done. It'll be up on YouTube shortly, so you can go back and check out any parts of it you missed. If we missed some questions, we're sorry. We tried to get to as many as we can. Thanks to the
think we
committee.
got most
Great
of them.
job.
This
Watch,
will be
follow our
completely,
Twitter.
3 weeks.
completely irrelevant in 21 hours.
That's right.
Yes. Follow us on Twitter. We'll tweet out how we did tomorrow. All right.
Take it
Guys,
easy,
it's been a
guys.
blast. Thank you.
Yep.
All right,
Gents,
Thanks, everybody.
Guys.
Have a good
All right,
night.
thanks.
All right,
Hey.
enjoy the games.
guys.
Hey, committee, stay on.